Have you watched my part 1 video on Overland and Wilderness First Aid? Hi everybody, I'm Rob and this is Storm Crew Overland. We talk about going on adventures, road tripping, camping, and just generally getting out and enjoying life. Well, this week's video, we're going to go into part 2 of our Overland Wilderness First Aid Guide that is based on the principles from TCCC. This may look a little different than what you're used to. I am out of town for business. So this week's video and possibly next week's video are going to be filmed here in my hotel room. We'll just do our best with it. I don't have my good camera. I don't have my good editing computer. So this is going to be shot on my phone and edited on my tablet. So if it doesn't look quite as good or sound quite as good, just have some grace with me. But moving in to the topic for the week. So last week we kind of talked about March, and that was how we do our casualty assessment. That's how we check over to see how the person is, what's wrong with them, what we need to deal with. March, just as a refresher, stood for massive bleeding, then airway, then respiration, circulation, and finally hypothermia. So this week's episode, we're going to focus this whole episode on just the M for massive bleeding. Kind of mentioned it last episode, but when it comes to March and the reason massive bleeding's at the beginning, the whole thing's in order of what's going to make the person stop living the fastest. And massive bleeding is that. You're talking 60 to 90 seconds before someone could potentially bleed out fast enough to be dead. So this is the thing we have to identify first and treat first and quick. So we're going to start by talking about some of the signs of massive bleeding. In a lot of ways, this one should be pretty obvious. We're talking about a massive amount of blood loss. First thing you're looking for is bright red blood. We're talking about massive blood loss. We're usually talking about arterial blood loss, so an artery that's gotten cut or damaged or whatever happened. So we're looking for bright red blood. Also looking for pools of blood. If we come up upon someone that's laying on the ground, they're obviously hurt, and there's a giant pool of blood. They are losing blood at a massive rate. That's a lot of blood. You're looking for clothing that's soaked in blood. If they're laying there and their pants are just completely soaked, that's a massive amount of bleeding. And finally, if you're dealing with someone that's got any kind of amputation, that's going to be massive blood loss because any of their limbs that got amputated have arteries in them. So just go ahead and treat it like massive bleeding. This is the kind of stuff when you're talking about spurting blood, lots of blood. One thing to caution you on, though, head wounds bleed a lot. Head wounds always bleed a lot. But there's very few arteries, from here up that are going to get hurt. But there's so many small capillaries and stuff. So even like a small cut on the forehead, it's going to bleed a lot. But it may not be life-threatening bleeding. So just kind of keep an eye on that for if you're dealing with a head wound. When it comes to massive bleeding, now that we've kind of identified it and we know what to look for, we've got 3 main tools we're going to use to treat the massive bleeding. The first and the quickest and easiest, if it'll work for wherever the wound is a tourniquet. If you've heard bad things about tourniquets, they're going to make you lose limbs and forget all that. These are super life-saving devices. They've saved thousands of lives on battlefields in cities. There's a reason soldiers carry these. There's a reason airmen and Marines carry these. There's a reason police carry these now. They work. They don't work for everything, only for specific circumstances. Main thing you're looking for with the tourniquet is any kind of limb, arms or legs. If you've got a massive bleed, a partial amputation, legs gone below the knee, whatever. If it's a limb, you've got enough room to put it on, go for a tourniquet. You want a good tourniquet, though. And good tourniquets aren't super expensive. This is the most common good tourniquet you will find or hear about is made by North American Rescue. It's called the CAT. It's the Combat Application Tourniquet. That's what I have here. This is a slightly older one that I have around for training, but they're all just the same general idea. And there are several other good tourniquets out there. Do a little research. Make sure you know what you're buying, especially if you're ordered from someone like Amazon when you're not entirely sure where it's coming from. There are, sadly, knockoff CAT tourniquets out there. And you don't want that. You want, so this is, if you're using this, it is someone's life on the line. So Spend the extra $10. Like I said, I think it's like 30 something bucks, maybe 40 at the most. Spend the extra money, get the real thing, make sure it's good. If you can, spring for two and get, so you have one to practice with. If you're really hurting for money, maybe buy one really good one, like an actual good cat tourniquet from North American Rescue. And then if you need to buy a knockoff to train with, okay, cool, whatever. That doesn't matter at that point. But just to kind of give you an idea of what the tourniquet is, you've got a big nylon strap with Velcro on it that goes around the limb. You're going to pull this as tight as you can, stick the Velcro to itself, and then you have, it's called a windlass rod. It's just a rod with a kind of a ribbon of nylon material that runs the length of the rest of this. And as you turn it, this whole thing just gets tighter and tighter. Imagine you're dealing with an artery in someone's arm or leg. Just think of it as a garden hose. You're using this to put pressure on that limb to basically compress that garden hose so blood stops flowing. When it comes to tourniquets, the biggest problems we see with people putting them on is, first, they're not putting them on tight enough. You need to do this initial part where you're putting it on. So I'll just throw it on my arm real quick just to kind of demonstrate. Put it on. This initial pull part, that needs to be tight. This part needs to be tight. This, realistically, if you're doing it enough to actually stop blood flow on someone that's actually injured, this should hurt. They should know you're doing something. When we did practice ones like this for instructor training and stuff, I came home with 2 bruised arms where you could see where the tourniquet had been. It's supposed to be uncomfortable. It's gonna hurt, but it's okay. Second biggest problem we see is people not putting them on fast enough. Really, if someone's got the kind of bleeding that needs a tourniquet, you've got the rest of their life to get it on. Because if you don't get it done in the next probably 60 seconds, and that's assuming you haven't wasted too much time getting there, realizing something's going on, assessing the situation, realizing they have a massive bleed. All that kind of counts into this time frame. Like I said, we've got 60 to 90 seconds, possibly, potentially, before they bleed out. So you need to do this quick. So yeah, like I said, the biggest problems we see is not getting it tight enough on the first part, not getting it tight enough on the twist, and then not doing it fast enough. So real quick, we'll go ahead and I'm going to demonstrate. I don't have a first aid dummy here to work on. I don't have another person to show you. So we're going to improvise and use a rolled up towel from my hotel room. Don't mind my belt here. It's just trying to help keep it in place. So we're going to pretend this is someone's leg. And their foot is on that side. The rest of their body is that way through the wall in my hotel room. It could be an arm. It doesn't matter. It's a limb. It's got injured, and we're trying to stop the blood from going that way. So tourniquet. You're going to open it up. You're going to put it around whatever that limb is. Pull this tight, like I said, tight as you can. Start this off tight. Wrap that Velcro around. You don't want to cover all this up because you still need to work with it. So, whatever you have left, kind of lay out. Second, you're going to have it take the windlass rod. You're going to give it several turns, probably 2 or 3. Probably don't want to go more than 3 because then you kind of risk breaking that internal strap. But if you need to turn it that many times, you probably didn't get it tight enough to start with. So once you get several turns, hopefully you can see it here on camera. There's a little channel this handle just clips into. And it sits there and holds it, and then it's got another little Velcro strap to go over that to ensure that doesn't come out. On the newer cat tourniquets like this one, this is actually, the little strap is white. And it's got a spot here where it says time. You want to make a note of what time you put this on somebody. Put it here. For actual military field kind of things, TCCC standards, you also mark it on their forehead, a big T, with either a Sharpie, a pen, finger paint it with their blood if you have to, though if you're doing this, there's going to be blood running around. You need to make sure that whatever medical professional ends up treating this person knows there's a tourniquet on here because when the tourniquet's on, you get buildup of certain chemicals in the rest of the limb downstream from the tourniquet, and they need to know that because they have to treat them a certain way. They need to give them certain medications, make sure this tourniquet gets released slowly, to slowly reintroduce that blood back into the system. It's a lot of technical things. That the biggest point is medical professionals that they end up with need to know this tourniquet's here. Um, so once you put the tourniquet on, you note the time, mark on their forehead if you can, whatever it takes to make sure medical professionals know tourniquet's there. Some other stuff you're never going to want to loosen this tourniquet. You're never going to take it off. You're never going to loosen it. If you put it on someone and you realize maybe the blood flow is slowed a lot but hasn't actually stopped, if you've got room, put a second one. And when it comes to placement on these, I should have mentioned that. You want to make sure, we're going to just use my arm for demo real quick. If I'm hurt here on my forearm, you want to make sure that it's several inches above the wound to keep the blood from going. You don't want the rest of the blood flowing out. So you're going to put the strap up higher. But you also don't want to tourniquet that joint. It's just too much moving around in there. It's too great a chance that you won't be able to get good pressure on that artery. So you're going to pretty much want to do it up. Realistically, if you're doing a tourniquet on someone's arms or legs, just remember high and tight, like a military haircut. You're going to want to put it pretty much as high as you can, as tight as you can, as fast as you can. All the way up on their arm, all the way on their leg. I mean, if you're putting a tourniquet on someone's leg, get it all the way up there. Get it up in their crotch. It might be weird at the moment, but they'll thank you later if you get it on there fast enough. And yes, if you're putting a tourniquet on someone's limb, there is a chance they will lose that limb. But probably not because of the tourniquet. Probably because of whatever wound necessitated you putting a tourniquet on in the first place. If someone's leg gets half blown off and you throw a tourniquet on to keep them from bleeding to death, well, their leg was already pretty jacked up to start with. They may end up losing it, but it won't be because you put a tourniquet on. Let's see. The other thing with tourniquets is they're one of those tools that are very specific. They're hard to improvise. I know when it comes to overlanding and outdoor stuff like that, we have lots of multi-use tools and lots of, you've got probably 10 different ways in your head you could repair your car with a cargo strap or something. It's hard to improvise a tourniquet in a good way. You need something relatively thick. You want at least like an inch and a half thick. You don't want to use something like boot laces. It's too thin. You're just going to actually cut into their skin and doing more damage. Trying to use something like a thick leather belt. It's great and it's wide enough, but then you probably can't put something in there and turn it effectively to keep that additional pressure on it. There's a chance they may loosen because you may not be able to secure it quite right. So tourniquets are really hard to improvise. So spend the money. If you're going to have, if you're going to be out there where help is far away, spend the money on a good tourniquet, practice with it, get some actual training. This is just information. This is not training. So go get some actual good training, hands-on somewhere. There's lots of courses out there. Moving on to our next tool, to control massive bleeding. And these two kind of work together. Is our hemostatic dressing. Hemostatic dressing is quick clot. Is the other thing. A lot of people have heard of quick clot. This used to be some weird stuff. When it first came out, it was a powder, and you had to open this and pour it in their wound, and it got real hot. And there were some versions that were made with shrimp shells, and people had allergic reactions to it. So quick clot got kind of a bad rap when it first came out. It worked, but it had a lot of weird side effects. They fixed all that years ago. Quick clot is amazing. And this is really something you're going to use in places you can't put a tourniquet. On like an upper body part, upper body stuff. You don't want to do it like where your lungs are. You don't want to be packing something like this in the lung cavities. But abdomen, your shoulder joints and stuff like that, if you can't get a tourniquet on there, that's where this is going to come in. And what this is, I don't want to open it because it's kind of messy, but it's gauze. It's a folded up thing of gauze, almost like sticky notes. that's impregnated with this whatever quick clot material it is. And what it is it's gauze, you stuff it in the wound, and the whole idea is it gives the blood that's coming out something to attach to, something to start clotting, so that wound has a chance to clot before they sit there and bleed to death. So it kind of just takes up space. This is another one of those times where if you do it right, and we'll talk about it in just a second, person, if they're conscious, is really going to hate you, because this is going to be painful to apply to the person. So I'm going to go back to my trusty towel leg thing, and we're just going to pretend that this is a wound. This is a gunshot wound in someone's abdomen. What you're going to do is you're going to start by, sorry, I got my notes here and I can't always see them. You're going to open this. You're going to take one end of that gauze, and I guess I'll use the end of this as an example, even though it's not the best. You're going to take the end of that gauze, and you're going to start stuffing it in that hole. And once you start, you always want to keep direct pressure on wherever you're stuffing this. You want to try to identify where in the wound the blood is actually coming from, like where the end of that damaged artery is, and that's where you want to start putting this. But if you can't tell, just start stuffing. It's not a very elegant solution, but that's kind of what you need to do. But once you start, and you're going to put direct pressure where you think that blood is coming from, you're going to continue. You're going to switch hands, but you're going to continue that direct pressure. And you'll switch fingers back and forth and continue to stuff this into their wound. You're trying to take up as much free space as possible. And chances are you're going to need to put all of this in, whatever that wound is. If it's a big enough wound to cause massive bleeding that you're worried about them bleeding to death, it's a big wound. You're going to put a lot of this. You might need to. You have to, but do what you can. So fit as absolutely much of this in there as you possibly can. Shouldn't be that hard to get the whole thing. And once you get it all in there, and we're going to pretend that I got this all stuffed in that wound, you're going to hold direct pressure on there for 3 minutes. And the idea is same kind of thing. You're keeping pressure on it. You're almost acting like a tourniquet to stop the blood flow, or at least slow it down some, to give that chemical and that bandage and everything else in there a chance to start clotting, to hopefully stop that blood flow. After that 3 minutes, we're going to try to put on what's called emergency bandage. And that's this. We'll talk about that in just a second. Same kind of thing as the tourniquet, though. If you put this in somebody, you want the medical professionals they end up with to know it's there. So what they tell us TCCC standards wise is there's basically you take the package and you kind of put it in their shirt where it's sticking out where they can see it, safety pin it to their collar so it's just hanging the empty container. So it's just hanging there. Whatever it takes to let the people know, because same thing, they don't want to like sew someone up and have this in them and them not realize it. They need to know it's there. It's so important that this, when you actually, if I could open it, I said I don't want the dust going everywhere. If you open it up and look at the gauze, it's got a blue thread that zigzags through the whole, however long it is. It's 4 yards long, 3 inches by 4 yards. It's got 4 yards, this little zigzag blue thread. And what that blue thread is for is whatever it's made out of, it glows like neon under an x-ray. So that if they take this person into an emergency room and they're prepping them for surgery or whatever it is, do an x-ray, they're going to say, oh, look, there's a big thing of quick clot. We got to make sure we treat that the correct way, whatever that is. None of my training or knowledge is at the emergency room level. It is at the tactical field first responder, like responding before the first responder level. I just saw this on the back of this and I thought it was cute. Never realized on the back it says do not reuse. No shit. If I stuff this in someone's body, do not pull it out and use it again. Don't know why, that just hit me really funny. Yeah. So once you get this in someone's wound, I'm gonna go back to our leg here. You're gonna want to put something on it to help hold that pressure after you've done that 3 minutes of holding direct pressure. In a lot of cases, you can use something like this. I just kind of messed it up to use the other demonstration, but it's got a couple of different names. There's a couple of different versions. Emergency bandage is Rayleigh bandage, pressure dressing, pressure bandage, anything like that. And what it is, it's a bandage and a dressing in one. It's basically, it's a big thing of gauze built into a big ace wrap with a mechanism to put pressure on the wound wherever you put this. And this just kind of helps keep that in place once you put it in there. Keeps a little extra pressure on it just to kind of help keep that blood flow from getting too bad. So what you do, and I love these. This is a very old one. It's very torn. Like I said, this is training equipment. And this is one of the Israeli bandages, emergency bandages, officially call it. But it's pretty much army proof. It's got pictures. And these, oh, I didn't mention, the quick clots, I think they're 20-ish bucks on Amazon. I'll try to remember to put links in the description. It's like 20 bucks. I think these are like 11. You can't really practice with these. You can practice with these. So buy two if you can. That way you have one to practice with. If you're local to me, if you're like some of my Oklahoma folks, and kind of give me a heads up, and you're gonna be at Rigs and Coffee or something, I could bring some out for people to practice with. I need to take them back because I use them to train people at work and stuff. But I have training ones if people just want to get some hands on and try it at least once so they can have an idea. But sorry, getting distracted. Back to the emergency bandage. So big picture, basically, the big Band-Aid part goes on wherever the wound is. So in this case, we're going to pretend they're hurt right here, kind of next to my belt. Let's hold this whole thing together. So we're going to follow the picture, put that right on top, and then you're going to take the rest of it. And you want to kind of keep this in your hand. You don't want to like drop the whole rest of it in the dirt. You're wrapping somebody's wound up in this. You want to try to keep it not sterile, but as clean as possible. I mean, worst case, you drop it in the dirt, still use it. They might get an infection, but at least they won't bleed to death. So you're going to wrap it around, and you're doing this kind of like an ace wrap. You want to keep it tight. It's not a tourniquet, so don't worry about it getting it too tight. But you want there to be some pressure. And when you get to this part, once you get that first initial wrap around, on this version, that has this C-shaped closure bar or pressure bar. There are other ones out there that are getting more popular now that are called an H bandage, and it's got a plastic H that you just kind of wrap the bandage around and change directions. On this, you take your cloth, slide it in the middle. It's always so easy to do it. I'm not on camera. And you just get in the middle of this, and then you change directions. And when you change directions, that's putting that pressure on that bandage. And that's where the whole name pressure bandage comes from. And then you're going to keep wrapping it around. And the whole time, you're going to kind of give it little tugs, keep pressure on it like you would, like you're trying to ace wrap someone's foot or something. It feels weird, like I'm trying to wrap up a disembodied leg or something, but it's all right. So keep going, keep tugging, keeping pressure on it. Your buddy's probably really mad at you right now if they're actually conscious, but it'll be okay. So wrap it around. You couldn't sit there and roll them like this probably, but I'm just trying to demonstrate real quick here in the hotel room. When you get to the end, this is the closure bar. It's got a little hook on each end. It's really hard to see on camera. I'll get a close-up shot, but there's little teeth in there. And what you do is once you get to the end and you've got this nice and tight, you're going to lift up one of the layers you've already completed, slide this under, and you're going to hook it onto that layer, into those teeth there, find the other side, pull that set of teeth out and hook it there, and that's going to keep it from coming unwound. So now you've used your hemostatic dressing, you've packed their wound, keep them from bleeding to death. You put your pressure bandage on top of that wound to keep pressure on it to help keep them from bleeding. Wrapped it all up, you have the closures. Now this should be good. Hopefully they're not bleeding to death anymore, and this is going to stay in place, and you should be about all set. That's really all there is when it comes to massive bleeding. Sorry this wasn't the greatest video. Weird circumstances, but hey, we just persevere, do what we can. If you have any questions, leave me some comments. Love to hear it. In fact, any kind of like, comment, follow, subscribe, emails, questions, messages, whatever you got. Let me know. I'd love to hear it. Love getting feedback. Love hearing what y'all think about things, or if there's something I need to talk about or new subjects to cover. But for now, really kind of wraps it up. For the next week's episodes, we'll start moving into airway and probably respiration. I think that'll make up enough of an episode. And then we'll save circulation, hypothermia for the next one. And then after that, we'll kind of follow up some general first aid things and other little treatments type stuff. But just kind of as a quick refresher on what we talked about when it comes to March, we're talking about massive bleeding, airway, respiration, circulation, hypothermia. This week we talked about the massive bleeding. So we talked about looking for those signs of red blood, pools of blood-soaked clothing, spurting blood, amputation, those kind of things. We talked about our 3 tools to deal with that massive bleeding. Our friend the tourniquet, hemostatic dressing, and pressure bandage. And like I said, these 2 kind of work together. We use tourniquet on the limbs. We use hemostatic dressing, lower abdomen and joints, places like that where we can't use the tourniquet. Final kind of thing is a joke. You cannot put a tourniquet to stop bleeding on someone's head because when you put it in here, then they can't breathe. You're just going to kill them anyway. Please don't do that. Someone jokes about it every time I do training. I always get that asked, especially by security forces. Do you put tourniquet on their head? No. So just a final thing. If you're watching this on YouTube, just realize we also release the audio as a podcast. You can find it wherever good podcasts are found. Just search Stormcrow Overland. If you're listening to this as a podcast, you want to see what's going on, you can watch it on YouTube at Stormcrow Overland. And you can also find us on Instagram at Stormcrow Overland. And finally, you can also send me an email if you want at stormcrowoverland@gmail.com. I don't check it very often, but I try at least once a week, try to look at it. If you send me a message, I will do my absolute best to get back to you. Kind of really sums it up. So I guess sometimes you have to go out and get lost and hopefully not encounter any massive bleeding before you find yourself. Thanks for watching.